Hello, my name is Yogan Naidu from a company called NTO Software Services, and the topic for today is to introduce to you bank statements, how you typically go about creating a bank statement together with their lines, and eventually how do you reconcile the bank statement and eventually complete a bank statement. Okay, by way of introduction, what IDM Pure does is it basically has documents called bank statements, which mimics your physical bank statements that you get from your bank. And typically, what a bank statement shows is flows of monies. So IDM Pure tries to track these flows of monies by associating a receipt of monies to a particular invoice, or alternatively to a payment to a particular invoice, and that's basically how payments, which in IDMPR can be both receipts and payments based on the document type, are actually linked to a bank statement. And that linking to the bank statement is called a reconciliation of payments to a bank statement. Okay, so typically you could create the bank statement lines. This is a bank statement that I've just created. You can create the bank statement lines in a number of ways. One is to physically get into the statement line and starting to create the lines this way, one at a time. Alternatively, if your processes so allow, potentially your business has created the payments already, in which case you would then create payments from by clicking on this button, where basically you're creating payments from you're creating bank statement lines from unreconciled payment lines. And then you have nice filters here whereby it changes what you see in terms of your payments. So in this particular case, let's move the end date restriction and then refilter it, and you'll see there's a whole bunch of new payments here. All these are basically receipts, and this is an outgoing flow of 1,000 rands to a supplier. So you can go ahead and actually click the various payments that you want to use to create your bank statement lines. Alternatively, you can go ahead and select everything and choose the ones that you don't want to have included in your bank statement line, and then press the green tick button to go ahead and create the lines. Okay. Today, however, we will essentially import a bank statement from a comma separated value file that is typically produced or provided by your bank. And so I've got a demo file here, and it typically looks like that, where it's various columns, and this is a date column, the transaction amount column, and your running balance, and there's your description. Some CSV files have a whole lot of other lines up before this first line, things like your statement dates, your statement account numbers, names, etc. And we're not really interested in that, so delete those lines, and we should really concentrate on the actual transactions. That's basically what we will delete. That's basically what we will import into our bank statement. Once you've massaged the file, be sure to save it as a .csv format, and typically you would save it as, and then you choose the CSV format that's available in your spreadsheet program. Okay. So good practice is to actually delete your previous imports, because you would do this quite often, and your interim import bank statement table or document would have a whole lot of other lines in it, and to call for less confusion and for better analysis of what was successful or not. It's a good practice to basically delete previous transactions in your import bank statement document. Okay, so we've deleted 5 records there. So let's go ahead and actually import the spreadsheet that we've downloaded from the bank. So you choose a menu item called Import File Loader, then you choose the formats of your choice. In this particular case, it's F&B. It's a local bank, and depending on whether you have the relationship you have with your bank, sometimes you have a business banking type arrangement with your bank, or you could just be a typical end consumer, and sometimes the formats differ based on what type of relationship you have. It's really easy to tweak these import formats, and if you make contact with us, we will do that for you. So let's go ahead and choose a CSV file that we're interested in, and there's the 5 records in there. It is good practice again to just scroll through the records and see more or less that the information is correctly transferred from the file into the format that we've specified. In this case, it does look fine. We have, importantly, note that there's 5 records that we want to import. Let's go ahead and do that, and then those records should be in an interim bank statement table or document, and we have 5 records here. You could massage this, but typically we don't do that because all the information that's required is populated in the correct fields. So let's go ahead and import the bank statement. Then at this stage you would have to choose the branch, and let's go ahead and import it. So importantly, the 0 is one bank statement that's been inserted or created with 5 bank statement lines, and the 5, that's important because that matches what was actually in our file. So let's refresh the screen here, and you will see that we do now have a new bank statement with some lines in it. Okay, typically the name has got a date and timestamp, and good practice is you typically want to put in the bank statement number of this particular bank account, and potentially a month or week that you're interested in. Okay, this bank statement, again, you need to verify whether the lines are indeed correct, and one of the quick ways of doing that is to compare. We started with 1,000 rands. The impact of the various lines was this, and then the ending balance was that. And if I have to compare that to the spreadsheet that we downloaded, or the CSV file that we downloaded from the bank, it is correct. So that's one quick way of checking that the import was all successful. Okay. So at this stage, let's go ahead into the lines and process the various lines. Okay, so the very first line is showing that it's some type of bank charge, and so let's just create a charge for it. So I'm just going to cut that, put a 0 amount in there, put a charge amount of -6, and as soon as you put an amount in the charge field, it gives you a drop down for the charges. If you find that the charge is not there at this stage, you just go and click the right button and you say requery, and then it should drop down all your charges. In this particular case, it's a bank charge. So that's basically what we want to achieve with this line. Importantly, this amount is small and trivial, but big amounts where you're not truly interested in the vendor, supplier, or customer, but it does have a tax implications. In our case, it does affect the input tax. So you would then say that this particular charge includes tax, and it would then be taken into cognizance in the tax that one needs to pay at the end of your tax cycle. So that's the field that basically makes that possible. Okay, so we're done with this line. So what this line is telling us that is that the expense is called bank charges, and we debit that expense, and that money has left your bank, so you'd credit the bank. Charge is basically a way of essentially choosing a particular GL account. And as mentioned, we are not truly interested in the supplier of this particular transaction line. Okay, let's go ahead and process the next one. Here we have a receipt of 5,000 rands, and so the description is customer A here has paid this amount on the 21st of May. So let's go ahead and put the business partner details in here, but you'd notice that it does have a sales transaction tick box. One would need to tick it in order to search for customer A. Otherwise, it'll assume that it's a supplier and not populate your business partner. So if you press tab at that point, it shows you all your customers with that key, and we're interested in customer A, and that's the information we put into that field. Okay, so what we want to show on this particular line is that we have these amounts and we know which business partners. So at this point we have all the information and we have the date to actually generate a payment for this line. So let's go ahead and create a payment for this line. And you would see that it has created a payment and basically populated the field with this payment. Okay, so all from the bank statement line, you've basically, you're noting the receipt of 5,000, but you've also created a receipt for that amount within Idempour. So if you had to go ahead and have a look at that receipt, you'd see the document type is a receipt, and it knows that it's customer A based on the customer line details that you put in there, as well as the amount is the correct amount. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at the another receipt line of 15,000 rands. And we want to generate a payment again here, because we don't have the payment, and that's basically the business processes I'm showing you. That the very first time I'm looking at this receipt is on the bank statement. So let's go ahead and okay, so that's what I was saying. If you don't indicate that it is actually a sales transaction, it'll look at your suppliers or vendors. So let's choose customer B here, and there we have customer B. And in this particular case, I want to show that we also have an invoice for this customer, and and if you go and have a look at this, you'd see indeed there's the 15,000 Rand invoice. So you pick that invoice up as well. Let's save this line, and now let's generate the payment and create the payment for this customer as well as for this invoice, and see what's the what happens. Okay, we're getting an error here saying the wrong allocation date, and I'm not sure why that is happening, so let's pause at this stage. Okay, so it turned out that my error was the account date was less than the invoice date, and hence it had an allocation error. Okay, but I've changed it since, and we are good to go now. If you now look at the invoice, you would see that it is paid, and it's been allocated as well. So when you put in the invoice details together with the customer and then generate a payment, it generates a payment but also allocates it to the invoice that you've chosen on this field. Okay, let's go to the next line. So yeah, so this is just another 7,000 Rand receipt. So let's put in the details in here. And I believe the payment already exists, so let's go ahead and try and find it. Okay, there's the there's the receipt. So in this example, what we're trying to show here is that the receipt exists, and we just pulled it into the bank statement line, so we could reconcile the receipt to the bank statement line. And the last one is purely a debit of 1,000 rands. And what I want to demonstrate on this line is that we could manually create this line. So what I'm going to do is delete this line and then recreate it manually. So to show you quickly that if you go into grid view, you can literally click various lines that you want to do things with, or you can click all lines or all off. In our particular case, you just want to click the one last line that we want to create manually and then delete. So create a new line here, put the description back in, and the statement amount was for minus 1,000 rands. Let's make that 0 again. So this line is being created manually, and this is how you'd create the lines manually, and you'd go through every line in your bank statement provided to you by your bank, and you'd go ahead and do it this way. So the supplier is supply A, and it did find it. Okay, And for demonstration purposes, I'm not going to have a payment or a charge, and let's see if we can find this out later. So if you now go back to the header and you see the consequences of all the lines and your manually created line, you'd see that the ending balance is still 26994 as per our import file. That's the running balance. Okay, so some of our clients have really big bank statements going into hundreds of lines, and having problems in that scenario is quite common. So one of the ways to resolve that is to export these lines into a spreadsheet and create the running balance yourself. Over time, we would create a report to achieve that, but for the time being, let's just export it and create a quick running balance. Okay, so it created a spreadsheet. Oh, it's just created one line. We're not really interested in one line. We want to create all the lines. So you untick that, and there you have. So let's try it again. Let's make it a spreadsheet format and all lines. So there's the amount column. So we could basically create a new column and say, so that is equal to, I know the beginning balance is 1,000 rands. Add that to your statement amount. There you have that, and then the next line is basically that amount plus that's cell value, and you should get your running balance like that. So once you have that formula in place, you can just drag it and you'd see that your running balance is now correct. And if you have 100 lines as mentioned, it is then quite easy to then figure out where your error lines are. Okay, so that demonstrates how we could find lines that are that have errors in it. Okay, the other thing that I want to explain is that we have a field that we've created, especially for all our Dazzle users, and that is a concept of a batch deposit. So an example of this is typically if you're using the bank's point of sale devices, or credit card machines rather, they would give you a bulk deposit on a daily basis, and then one would then need to reconcile that bulk receipt to all the payments that happen during the day. And this batch deposit is that concept whereby you group a whole lot of payments, either receipts or payments, and and this is a way that you would reconcile it to the bank statement line. Okay, so we are now done with our lines. Got 5 lines here. So let's go to the bank statement header. The very first thing, as mentioned, is to check the ending balance, and that's all fine. So everything appears correct at this point in time. There's one report that we've created. And that report is this report here, which basically gives you a date range, and we've been typically working within the May month and for that particular branch, and it basically shows you which lines have not been reconciled. So what does that mean? So typically every line in your bank statement should either have a charge or be reconciled to a payment. It's telling us that line number 50 has got a problem. It doesn't have one of those two conditions mentioned. So let's go ahead and correct that. Okay, so here we go. Here's 1,000 rand. So in this particular case, we could either generate a payment, alternatively we could do a charge. So let's just generate a payment rather, and that's done, and then allocates the payment to it. So let's go back and then rerun this report and see if it comes up with that line again. Shouldn't. Okay, the other thing about this report is it basically looks at all your open bank statements. It does not consider closed bank statements. Okay, so we've checked the balance of the bank statement and it looks fine. We've run the reports, the bank reconcile report, to see that every line is indeed allocated to a charge or a payment. So that's fine. And we can now go ahead and basically complete the bank statement. So you see it is now posted and it is completed. Okay. There may be occasions where after the fact that the bank had an error in their bank statements, or alternatively the operator made a mistake. Under the role of accountant or admin, we could then go ahead and basically reopen the bank statement. Okay, let's maybe bring up the bank statement here. So in this particular one, you can see it is posted and completed, but there's document action of reactivate, and if you had to go through this action and press the tick box, what would happen is this whole bank statement would be open, and one can then go and edit or add lines that were problematic in the bank statement. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Okay, so I just want to show you one report on the typically on the month end or weekend, wherever your process sort of rounds off. An important report is the unreconciled payments. So what this report would show you for a particular date range in a bank account, it'll show you all payments that you have in your system, all payment documents, either receipts or payments that have not been reconciled to a bank statement. And if you're closing a particular period, in terms of your processes, that is, you don't want to have that situation. So this is an important report to consider. Okay, so hopefully that was beneficial to you, and we'll see you next time.